All of a sudden, I'm ending up crying. Pulling my wife in.
They are. Oh man. Okay.
Let's celebrate. Every other day, I felt this thing. I'm like, wait a minute, man. I'm just open and spilling everything at this moment. It's great, man. It's great what you guys are doing.
Welcome to the Epic Voices and Conversations podcast, giving you, the listener, the opportunity to experience, engage, explore, and sometimes share stories of energy, passion, inspiration, and connectedness. We are your hosts, Raquel Buchanan
and Dave Matthews. Our real jobs between doing these podcasts are being mental health providers, therapists, and group facilitators, working with people whose issues are related to high stress, trauma, violent behavior, and intimate partner or family violence.
As a part of providing trauma-informed care, we intend for these podcasts to inspire professionals working with children, youth, and adults who have experienced trauma or violence some hope and support to build self-awareness, increase professional self-care strategies, and to help in developing resilience while doing the work in the field.
The Epic Voices and Conversations podcast is brought to you by 1P Productions.
Are you ready for some interesting conversations, stimulating considerations, and hearing passionate voices? The Epic Voices and Conversations podcast, the Epic Moments interview with J.R. Martinez.
In this episode, we're having a conversation with J.R. Martinez, who is a national speaker on overcoming adversity. He's a motivational coach who has himself had some very direct and intense experience in overcoming adversity and moving from trauma to triumph. JR was a keynote speaker last year at the 24th Annual International IVAT Summit and shared many of his experiences then. He also was one of the main reasons why this podcast exists. I truly feel honored that he was willing to spend some time with us to share some of his epic moments.
JR is the author of the best-selling book, Full of Heart, a story of survival, strength, and spirit. JR has been featured on nationally syndicated shows including The Ellen DeGeneres Show, Oprah, and Dancing with the Stars. JR is known for talking about his experience as an Army veteran and survivor of combat injuries, and for his roles on All My Children, the television series Safe, and Army Wives.
You know, he is a remarkable man, and he has such a great recent perspective of IVAT and the summit from his experience as a keynote speaker.
We can't talk about trauma-informed care without also talking about resiliency. Dave, wouldn't you say JR is a great example of that? His website, jrmartinez.com, says that his mission is to spread his message of resilience and optimism while doing it with a smile.
Hey, there they are. Good to see you, JR.
Yeah, saying good to see you as well. So I'm just excited about this conversation, to be honest with you. I think I'm in a position in my life, as I did last year at IVAT, to really open up and share a deeper level of what it is that I have overcome. As I said to David, like, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. When I think about that, I think about, as a veteran, I mean, obviously there's an incredible issue in our community with mental health, and 20 veterans committing suicide every single day. In all reality, I think there has to be some component where people have to be willing to discuss this, but a lot of the individuals that join the military that later develop this, in many cases it's related to combat and to deployment. But I know that there are a lot of those individuals like myself that joined the military with some experience, with some traumatic experiences, and the military was an escape. But as we both, all of us know on this call, you can only escape so much, and it eventually catches up to you.
Things that I've been thinking about, JR, is I have some clients right now that are military, right? Or ex-military vets, and many of them have post-traumatic stress, but they don't have the physical injuries, right? Do you get much blowback from that, around that, from other vets in terms of your experience? Yes, and you have the scars, unfortunately, from all the experience that you've had being in the military. But do you get much at all from vets about
You know,
saying, "Hey, I don't have those injuries, and you
yeah.
do, and nobody's seen my injuries," right?
Right. I do frequently. And I think what I have learned over the last 17 years is be living in a world that is incredibly visual. In order for us to, it's that saying, out of sight, out of mind. And
Right.
if something's out of sight, then it's out of mind. We're not aware of it. We're not in tune with it. And I have learned how to leverage my scars to utilize it to then kind of, because and I'm okay saying this. I'm okay, completely comfortable. It doesn't. I'm secure within my body and my skin.
Uh-huh.
But there is an element of, there's a shock factor. There still is an element of this. Oh, I need a second. I'm taken back by what I'm now encountering.
Yeah.
So I learned about this early on when I was 20, 21. I started to see this, the way people behaved when I initially walked into the room.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I started thinking to myself, wait a minute, I can utilize that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because how many
Right.
of us in this world are navigating where all we want is a little bit of, for someone to look at us and pay attention to us
Mm.
for 15 seconds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just give us that moment. And what
Right.
I know is that my scars create that element of where I have people's attention, unconditional attention, for at least 10, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And then what I do with that 10 or 15 seconds now hopefully expands it to a minute to 2 minutes, and hopefully me sharing something with them that I believe is important to me. And the
Right.
reason I use that analogy is because that's what I started to do with veterans. For me, it
Gotcha.
was a matter of, I know a lot of my good friends don't have the same physical wounds that I have, or have any physical wounds at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I can relate to that. I can
Mm-hmm.
relate to that, not
Yeah.
because of my injury, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that because of like my mother and my
Yeah.
child,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
I empathize
Yeah.
maybe, differently. So what I
Right.
do, I always talk about when I'm at an event and people will say, thank you for your service. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about what a veteran looks like. Let's talk about
Right.
what service members look like.
Yes.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about what military families actually look like. And I'll start to say, yes, I'm in this incredible position where I can use my scars to now get attention and
Yeah.
create this element of a platform. But the platform, what I'm going to do with it is, I'm now going to represent those that don't have the same platform, because they don't have the same scars. They don't have that same, element of shock of getting people's attention.
Right.
So I do get that frequently. And that's why for
Yeah.
me, it's incredibly important to talk about, the invisible wound,
Invisible wounds. Right. Yeah.
emotional, mental wounds, and not necessarily just because I also experienced it. I mean, it's easy to focus on physically what I endured, and you
Yeah.
know, the over 35 surgeries that I've had. It's easy to focus on that, but it's a matter of seeing, understanding that mentally and emotionally, I also endured a lot, and there was a lot of new things that I had to discover about myself in order for me to fully, completely recover and heal. I do a lot of work, not only for veterans that have physical scars, physical wounds, but I do a lot of work with veterans that, have that invisible wound. Um, and what's really interesting is that a lot of them have a tendency to believe, well, I can only relate to another veteran that has,
Mm.
the same exact thing as me. And there's so many veterans that suddenly, when I start talking to them, or anybody in my position that has a physical scar, that they immediately deem as, you've had a different recovery process. When we start talking with one another, suddenly you start to find, like, oh wait, you felt that too. Oh wait, you worry about that judgment. Oh wait, you're constantly like looking around and uncertain about the space and the environment that you're in. Wait, you don't trust either.
Mhm.
Oh wait, oh okay, wait a minute, there's a lot of parallels here. I jokingly tell people, like, I've gone to therapy a couple of times, and and I feel like I need to go to therapy now, because I'm dealing with a new set of concerns
Mm.
and experiences and feelings that I didn't have the last time I went to therapy. And
Yeah.
so it's important, I think, for all of us to find
Beautiful.
that space and that individual or individuals
Yes.
that help us sort of navigate through those emotions and those feelings related to this particular stage that we're at in life, because the stages constantly evolve if we're willing to allow ourselves to evolve with it.
I like what you said about social support, that no matter who you are, what you're struggling with, that social support is that number one that's going to help you recover, that's going to foster resiliency. And this is so much what the Epic Moments interview is about, is establishing these connections, these ideas of social support and all the support around you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you mentioning that.
Well, it again, and I don't want to use. My wife says I'm like the king of analogies. Like I never was a big Brady Bunch. I never watched the Brady Bunch, but apparently the dad would always use analogies, and I am like an analogy king. Like I can think of an analogy and just like throw the lesson in there. And I think I learned to do that because I feel that's what's really going to resonate with people, right? Next time they maybe see that thing on the wall or refer to that individual, they're gonna be like, I remember there was this crazy analogy, and they remember hopefully the lesson that immersed in it. But Raquel, like it's like the military, and in the military, I was an infantryman, and infantry is front lines, is combat. And there's a tactic that I remember, and again, my military career was cut very short due to my injury, but I remember there was a tactic that was explained to me where you flank the enemy. And essentially, so let's say, for example, like, okay, this is me and our unit, and this is the enemy, right? We're kind of like the old wild, wild west, right in front of each other. And that you're right in front of one another. But what we do is we create this tactic where we spread out. And while this front line is approaching the enemy, it catches their attention, and now they're engaged in fighting this group of individuals. We have a group of individuals coming around the back and flanking them. And we have to think about all of the things that we avoid, all of the things that are difficult for us to deal with. That is the enemy, right? And the only way that you actually truly eliminate that enemy is you have to be willing as a team and your social support system to be able to come together and say, we're going to flank this thing. We're going to come at it from all of these different angles. And I think different people allow you to be able to approach the threat in a different way. So my best friend, Dan, who in many ways is the reason that I am where I am today, both in many cases professionally and personally, but also at the same time, so he gives me a set of skills and a set of tools. But then, okay, now my wife has given me another set of skills and another set of tools. And then, and you just start to find these individuals that give you bring something completely different to the team, that allow you ultimately to face that threat, where you feel confident that, okay, I'm fighting right now, and oh my God, I don't know if I can keep fighting because we're face to face. Okay, here comes the relief from behind or from the side, and that's part of my team. And it's important for people to understand that you find those team members through, just through life, and it's not always going to be the same group of people. In some cases, it's going to be an individual or individuals that just you spoke with for maybe an hour, and they just gave you something enough to feel like, okay, I can go do this. And so it doesn't all I've lost the belief in my recovery process. I've lost this belief that I have to speak to someone that has verbatim been through exactly the same thing that I have been through. I've lost that, because I have encountered so many people, I'm sure as you guys have as well, where the more you talk to people, understand their experience and their journey, that's completely different from yours. If you're receptive to that, they're going to give you so much incredible information.
We did gather a little bit about, who you are, where you come from, the kind of this external, to kind of put a pun on there. And what we're really interested in is what's beyond that, beyond your military experience. We want to know what inspires you, what has gotten you to talk to people at the capacity that you do. And specifically, I'm interested in, last year you had mentioned that you kind of changed your approach to the presentation, and maybe that you added some things or you left some things out. And I'm interested in hearing what made you change that. What made this IVAT presentation different than previous ones? And what did you add? What did you change?
So the first part of that question is what drives me. And what I found about 6 months after I was injured is I found that I can use my experience and at that point, a very early experience and recovery process of 6 months to assist and help others and give people what I felt I didn't have in those prior to those, in those initial 6 months, which is hope. And for me to give somebody hope that, hey, man, you're going to be okay, you're going to make it out of this, I think was everything for me. It almost became an obsession of mine where it was like this passion and it was this thing that I loved. I loved passing and giving people that feeling. And I loved the feeling that it gave me. And so what happened is I quickly found my new purpose. I found my new reason for being. I found a way to validate all of this and make sense of it because I was going to use it to help other people. So then I get involved with a nonprofit a year after I was injured, help, becoming an ambassador for service members and their families. And I get really immersed into that community and understand the challenges that they faced then. And I became passionate about it. That's where it was birthed. It was birthed, honestly, in the military, where I understood purpose and I fell in love with service. And those are the two things that started to really drive me. And then I found a new way to serve and I found a new purpose after my injury. For me, I guess my motto is I always say, I'm trying to pass on everything that I've learned in my second chance at life with those individuals that are still in their first chance at life. I say that because obviously my life was spared. I could have easily died and I was close, but I didn't. I'm here. And there's a lot of individuals that are still in that first chance and we're not sure if you're going to get a second chance. You may not be as lucky, right? It just everybody has a completely different destiny. So my passion is every opportunity that I get to be in front of somebody, to influence somebody, to motivate them, to challenge them, to grow both professionally and personally. Man, you start to see it, you start to feel it come out of me because I see it like this is my one chance to be in front of this individual. I don't know if I'm ever going to be in front of them again, and I'm not going to waste this opportunity. Now, to the second part of that question related to IVAT, I think what was the major part of what was different there is I didn't want to go into it with so much preparation. I really wanted it to feel like a conversation, just have a casual conversation where there's no real pressure. And then the idea in my mind of, do I want to go to this place? Do I want to talk about the thing that I feel like I have not discussed publicly? And that is related to a lot of the trauma that I experienced as a young boy, related to my mother's partners who were incredibly abusive, related to, my mother at times, being abusive towards me. And, that is something that I haven't discussed. And part of that is part of that belief to not discuss those things were, one, I think there was maybe subconsciously a component of where me just trying to like just push it down and not trying to remember those things, but also two, culturally being Hispanic, but then also being the only son, the only child. Growing up as the only child, my mother's all I had. So I felt this component of where I needed to protect her. So if I shared this information, whether as a young boy or even as an adult, I'm now exposing this individual who to me is everything, is my lifeline. And I don't want to expose her. I don't want people to see her in a certain light because she is this incredible individual. Just unfortunately, she's developed a hardened heart and she's become bitter towards life and people to some degree because of the experiences that she's had. And I felt that in that room with all of those incredible trained professionals and people that I knew could be empathetic and can show compassion and I knew that that was the room for me to just let go and let that be the first time I go to a place. Obviously, as you guys both know, I got a little choked up, being on stage, and for me, I don't shy away from that. I don't shy away from allowing myself to feel something in the presence of, a person or 500 people or 2,500 people. It doesn't matter to me. If I'm going to feel it, I'm going to feel it. And I'm going to share that because I have discovered that in vulnerability, there is community. And I want to be as vulnerable as possible and share every component of my process with people, because I know that there are components of my life that'll help somebody else kind of navigate through their own.
When you start to acknowledge and integrate those experiences into your life, how does that change your narrative? How does that change the way that you look at situations, you look at your choices, the way that you look at yourself?
Oh my God, it's incredibly freeing. I feel like I get a better understanding of how to create the story that I want to create for myself. I start to understand certain patterns and choices that I've made that had all it's done is triggered this emotion and this feeling, right? And then I start understanding what cycles I need to break. And I start to become incredibly aware of that, to understand what I don't want to experience anymore, what I don't want to feel, what I don't want to pass on to my daughter. And it's been incredibly freeing for me to come to terms and understand a lot of my choices and experiences in the past. I remember being 21 years old, 22, 23 years old. And I can tell you that, and I don't know if people will relate to this at all, but in my personal experience, I know that I have always been seeking validation, community. I've always been seeking a community, and I've always been seeking unconditional love. And it doesn't mean that my mother doesn't love me, but my mother loved me with condition. My mother said, if you stay here, if you do what I want you to do, if you follow this, then I'll love you. And she didn't say that, of course. I know she loves me. I mean, I know she does. However, because of the experiences she's had, and she hasn't broken certain cycles, and she's not aware of what she's doing, that's what I gathered from all of that. And so I remember being 21, 22, 23, seeking validation. Of course, the scars on my body doesn't help when I'm a young kid and I'm just out there trying to do what all the other 21, 22-year-olds are doing. And I would go out with my friends, and we'd go out to a bar, or a club, and I would, and what I would do to get validation, I'll pay for everything. I'll cover everything. Who bought this? JR did it. Oh, JR did it. Wow. Like, we love you, JR. Wow. You're going to, like, and I was doing it in this very unhealthy way. And then what I started to experience, and this is where this vulnerability component comes into play. If I liked a girl, if I like bought her a drink, or if I did some gesture, showed a gesture, and then she was like, oh, cool, thank you. But then I saw her like talking to another guy, and then all of a sudden there was no attention to me. I took that incredibly personally. And those were the nights where at the end of the night, I was angry and I was upset and I was bitter, and I was an unpleasant person to be around. Well, because, like, I was out there trying to buy people's love and affection in the wrong way. And part of that stems from my childhood of feeling like I didn't have that. And all I was trying to do was get it. And it didn't last, it doesn't say that they didn't like me. It just, then they started to maybe not like me because of my actions, when everything was triggered. And when I became aware of that, and I didn't become aware of that till I was probably 26 years old, and when 26, 27 years old. And when I became aware of that, I then started to change my approach, and I understood what I needed to do differently. And I think that's what's key is that I have just frequently have been open to put myself in these positions. And if people are going to judge me, okay, that's fine. But I feel freer and I feel lighter, and I feel like I can move through this world faster because I'm not carrying the same baggage.
So from the 2019 IVAT Summit, do you have any memorable moments, something that stood out, maybe a interaction with someone that really led to that vulnerability you were talking about?
Oh my God. So talking to Sandy, I think talking to David and some of his colleagues the night before, we got there, and we went downstairs to the lobby restaurant bar, and we were like, I think there was a football game on, and we're gonna sit there, and we're gonna grab something to eat because we got in pretty late. We're gonna grab something to eat, and suddenly, I don't know how, David is sitting next to us, and before you know it, we're like sitting at the same table, and we're like talking, and we're chatting, and we're learning about what he does in his profession. And and that allowed me to feel incredibly comfortable. It allowed me to feel to be at ease and to feel that this is a safe place for me to go. And then the following day, before I went up to present, talking to Sandy more in depth about IVAT and, all the work that they're doing, that added another level of just this kind of this ease of just made me feel incredibly comfortable. But I remember going into a couple of breakout sessions and, just listening. I don't remember the individuals' names that were leading those discussions, but there was one breakout session that I went into, and it was I think the ladies, if I'm not mistaken, are from Canada, and I feel like I took a picture of it, and I feel like I discovered that picture the other day, going through my phone. So I'm going to do something a little unprofessional right now. I'm actually going through my phone because I'm trying to find that image, because it really stuck out to me. And I took a picture of the screen, and it was something that allowed me to have one of those aha moments that, oh, is that what that thing is called? Is that what that is? And I remember they put up on the board, if you have been susceptible to this or to that, and they start going into kind of describing what it is. But I think I recall them saying that it was called, and you guys are obviously the professionals, so you guys would either tell me I'm wrong or I'm right on course, but I think it was coercive control. Yeah, they say control becomes coercive when it involves the repetitive use of tactics to regulate and dominate an intimate partner's daily life and restrict personal liberties. And I just remember taking a picture of that, and in my mind, I thought of different things, and I thought of my childhood, of course, and I thought of whether it was related to my mother and towards me, or her partners towards her. And that is obviously, I took a picture of that, and it just stuck with me. And to be able to label it and to understand, oh, that's what that's called, or that's what that is. Oh, that's interesting. So then when I find myself, potentially engaged in this learned behavior, I'm able to say, wait, I'm participating in that thing. I don't remember the name, as you guys already, but that thing, I know it's not a healthy thing. So let me break away from that. Let me figure this out. So I just think, to have so many incredible individuals that, were at that summit from all over the world, and to come together with this underlining passion and desire to help people heal and help people understand that they shouldn't be content with just being alive, but helping them understand how they can learn to live. That was in itself was just a beautiful experience.
That is very cool. Well, thank you for that. Wow, JR, that's a great memory to have.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think that is what's really incredible, is that there's so many just people. They're not people that are like on TV and celebrities and considered. They're people that are living in our communities.
Yeah.
That are our neighbors, that are doing incredible things, that are survivors, that have once upon a time would have been labeled as victims, and then have slowly understood how to make different choices and decisions for themselves, which then created them to become leaders. And now they are survivors. And because they're leaders and they're survivors, they're paving the way for other people. And so they're going, that quote, that Ralph, I think it's Ralph Emerson that says that quote, do not go where the path may lead, instead go where there is no path and leave a trail. And IVAT to me consisted of hundreds of people that are creating new paths and leaving trails. And that is a beautiful thing to experience, to know that there are that many people around the world that just give a damn. They care.
It's wonderful. I love the way that you speak, and I can see how you've made success being a motivational coach and speaker. You're very self-aware, and you recognize your influence on other people. And that's one of the biggest things, and where we start is recognizing the power that we have over the other people and the ability to change their lives.
That's what I want people to understand, is that I went from there was nothing that much more special about me. I was a 19-year-old kid. My mother's from Central America, immigrated to this country, raised me by herself the best that she could, broke a lot of cycles, gave me a great life. I mean, there were some challenges, but still I have fond memories of my childhood. and I go off to the military. I get injured. I, fought for my life, and here I am. What separates me from anybody else? The fact that I was on TV. I just got an opportunity to go on TV and be in front of more people at one time. That's the only thing.
Stay tuned for the Epic Moments interview with J.R. Martinez. If you'd like your agency, company, or group to have a presence on this podcast, or you'd like to advertise for an event or show your support, please contact us for rates and formatting for your announcement. We can be reached directly at evac@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Epic Voices and Conversations podcast, a place where you can share your stories of energy, passion, inspiration, and connectedness. We are on the line with J.R. Martinez, Army veteran, actor, and motivational speaker. I'm sure he has some epic moments to share.
JR, the Epic Moments strategy is meant to be used by people who have experienced trauma or for professionals who work with trauma-experienced people as a way for the user to literally affect brain physiology. When we're stressed and the cortisol stress chemical is released, the signals to the brain and the rest of the body is to be on alert and survive whatever the stress is that's being experienced. The antidote or counterbalance to the stress chemical, cortisol, is another chemical referred to as the attachment chemical, oxytocin. When this is released, oxytocin, it produces a sense of safety, security, peace, and calm. One of the best ways to have this chemical released is by connecting with someone else. This can be done with mutual caring and appropriate touch through a hug or hand on the shoulder. But this oxytocin can also be released when the thought of a person or group is accessed in the mind we have felt connected to in the past, someone we feel safe and secure with, or has given us a sense of compassion. And someone we feel safe and secure with and gives us that sense of compassion. Having a list or set of lists of these things that bring us energy, that we are passionate about, phrases, words, or people who inspire us, and specific people in our experience who we feel connections with. That's what this Epic Moments and this collection, this is used for, is to be able to release the oxytocin by having those lists in our mind. What we know is that when others share their trauma with us, it becomes our trauma. Likewise, when others share their experience of triumph over trauma, it is making a connection for us, which leads to a greater sense of hope and resilience.
The Epic Moments interview is used to counterbalance any feelings of stress or disease. I think we should start by using some scaling questions first to get an idea of any stress that JR may be experiencing. JR, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst you've ever felt and 10 being the best you've ever felt, how would you say that you're feeling right now at this moment?
At this moment, I would say probably a 9.
Great. Okay, so we got a baseline. We have a little room for improvement. So let's see where we can go with the Epic Moments interview. That's a great place to start.
So now let's start with these epic moments, all right? Can you talk to us, JR, a bit about those things that you find bring you energy in your life?
Oh, wow. I think for me, I love to, now that I have a little bit more time at home, I think as many of us have had over the last, couple of months, finding time to exercise. I think that is something that really gives me life. I also love to listen to podcasts and podcasts related to people sharing, just stories of whether it's something I understand or not, but it's a matter of just hearing about other people's journey. That brings me life. Being with my family, that brings me life. That gives me energy, and just being with people is what gives me life. Listening to people, really truly being present, not just physically there, but actually mentally being present, gives me energy and gives me life.
Nice.
People are my lifeline.
Very nice. And although you wear your passion on your sleeve, and it's very apparent, What are those things you are particularly passionate about these days?
I think it's the same. The passion is the same, and it is how many people can I impact before that moment comes when I'm no longer on this earth. And so for me, I think underlying is I want to influence people. I want to influence my daughter. I want to give her as much exposure to the world at her very young age, so that way when she becomes a young adult and she's exposed to something, whether it be somebody who has scars or whether it be someone who shares a personal story, it's not traumatic to her. She's already a few steps ahead to where she can get into the component of like getting to know them as a person versus trying to process what they shared with them. I just want to influence, man.
And what are those phrases? What other quotes or people or situations that have been inspirational to you in your life?
I got to be honest with you. I'm in this really interesting position where I've had this incredible opportunity to meet people from all over the world and to hear about people's, as you stated, triumph over whatever tragedy that they experience in their life. That's inspirational to me. That is, whether it's going to a Special Olympics event and seeing the athletes there, whether it's seeing, a mother or father who has lost their child due to whatever it may be, but now becoming advocates. I mean, I am incredibly I cry about everything now. Like I am always crying, and I can watch one of those. I love sports, and I can watch one of those ESPN 30 for 30s, and they do a little piece, and I'm just sitting there like I'm crying. I'm on the plane, I'm crying. I can listen to a song, and Andrea Bocelli, "Time to Say Goodbye," and I'm listening to that. I'm like, there's certain points in that, and I'm like, oh. like I'm gone. I'm gone. I'm a mess. And I think because I have learned to find beauty in every freaking thing that has life, everything, I find beauty in it. Everything that moves, everything that looks, that tastes, that touches, that smells, everything that just moves and crosses my eye line, I just watch it. I become incredibly observant. I process that. And then my daughter said to me the other day that in her morning meeting, with her teacher, they asked the class, if you could be like an animal, or if you can kind of transition, like if there was like if you can go through the process of like being an animal at this stage and then ending and being this other animal. And I don't know what the exercise is about, but my daughter's recounting this and she's telling me that her answer was that she would love to be a caterpillar and then be a butterfly. Because and the teacher said, well, why? And she's like, well, because I want to experience what that transition is like, what that how you go from here to here. 8 years old.
8 years old.
I'm sitting there listening to this and I'm like, it's so beautiful. And yes, we're all caterpillars and we're all trying to be butterflies and fly, into the world and have these beautiful colors. And man, that is, I think, the beautiful thing about what God and life has blessed me with, and just being around so many people that I can look at a simple story analogy that my daughter shares in her classroom that moves me, and what it does is it inspires me, and now I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I was a butterfly in this life, but they don't have a long lifeline, and now I'm back to a caterpillar and I'm on the ground kind of maneuvering through. How do I develop and blossom into this butterfly again at this different point in my life? I got way too deep about it.
We got to get your daughter on here, JR, to answer the epic moments.
I'm telling you, she is going to take over the family business. That's going to be her thing. She took my phone the other day and just recorded an Instagram message, and she was like, listen, this is all really tough. This is, and this is, I missed this, I missed that, but hey, we got each other. And I'm like, I go back to my phone and she's recorded this video and I'm like, who are you? Who are you?
Oh, that's wonderful.
it's that learned behavior, you know, it's
Uh,
learned behavior
yeah,
she witnesses from me and from my wife, that she
right.
picks it up and she just, emulates it.
Absolutely. So, and you've already mentioned a number of people, so you can just kind of list off some of these people, but who specifically are those people or groups who, when you think about them, have this feeling of that connection that bring a sense of safety and security for you?
So veterans, I think, um,
Mm,
I would say individuals that, like, for example, like the Special Olympics community,
mm,
who I've been able to do a lot of work with. I think individuals that, like my mother, who I said is an immigrant, was an immigrant. I think, when I hear stories of individuals like that, I think I really connect with. I mean, obviously, Dan, my best friend, my wife. There are a lot of friends that I have from all walks of life
mhm,
that give me that feeling. It's hard for me to really peg it down to a couple of different things, just because, again, I know this sounds like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but I can't stress it enough how uh, important it has been for me, and how much I pull from all of these different sources.
mhm,
And they could be somebody. I I recently, end of 2019, I traveled to Atlanta and I spoke at Delta. And I had an incredible, time with them, a great speech, great feedback. I get on the plane, I fly back here, to Austin, where my home is. And on the flight, there was something, I forget exactly what it was, that triggered these feelings. And suddenly, by the time I got off of the plane, I just was in a different space. I had a different energy, and I park at the airport. So I get in the car and I go to pay to exit, the airport. And there's a lady, and I give her my ticket, and she sees my hand. Now, again, my hand was burned as well. She sees my hand, and she asked me, she said, "What happened to you?" And I had a choice in that moment. I had a choice I was obviously not in the best space. I had a choice to engage or not. I chose to engage. So I engaged and I explained to her what had happened very quick. And then she says, "Mm, would you mind if I pray for you?" I had a choice. I was like, well, I mean, there's cars behind us. I don't know how long is this prayer going to be. But then I was like, okay, fine. She takes my hand. She closes her eyes. She doesn't say it out loud, just internally. She says a little prayer. Then she takes another one of those tickets that you get when you go into a parking structure. She writes Amitoba. She writes, and she writes it out, and I feel like I have it. It's in my travel bag because I always have it. And she writes Amitoba. She hands it to me, and she says, "This is a Buddhist, and he represents infinite light, infinite wisdom." And she said, "You are a mitoba. You have infinite light. You have wisdom. You have all of this." And she's sharing all this. And she goes, I mean, she says it a lot better than me. And by the time, it was like, okay, I can leave, I called my wife and I was like, "Oh my God, I met this incredible lady and she prayed over me." And my wife's like, "What? Like, what are you talking?" And I had this incredible feeling. I mean, this lady gave me this beautiful gift that took me out of that space,
yeah.
but I had a choice. I could have engaged in that or not. And I've had so many of those moments over the course of my life.
Wow.
So I don't really take for granted an opportunity.
Wow.
If the universe or God or whatever you believe in is putting you in a space, there's a reason you're there, and there's a lesson, and there's something you can take away from that experience. And so everything, man, I know it sounds cliche, everything truly inspires me. It really does.
Beautiful, beautiful. So the idea here is, what as you have these lists of these things that bring you energy, things that you're passionate about, that are inspiring to you, and as well as the people of your tribes, the different tribes that you connect with. All those things are brought to mind in times when you are stressed, when you do feel in those moments of kind of overwhelmness, that those lists, those pieces, those epic moments that you described are then accessed during that time of stress as a way to help to counterbalance the stress,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that in my mind's always racing, and whether it's me doing a physical activity, working out, and I feel like, man, I can't go, I can't do this anymore. I always think back to me surviving, having to learn how to walk again, how to learn
Mm,
learning to feed myself, to dress myself, all of those basic things.
right.
I go to that place when I have this, I think of individuals that I've met that have, which many people would look at and say they have a disability. And I think about everything that they overcome and how they, live life daily. That gives me life. I always pull from, different people. And I think, which is why it's so important to hear about other people's, in this case, epic moments, because it allows us to understand that we too can create our own epic moments and have them and then pass those epic moments down. And so I'm always, my mind is always thinking of different people, and I may not remember their name.
Right.
It's like Maya Angelou said, you won't remember what people, say or what they do, but you'll remember how they make you feel. And I'm always remembering how people make me feel. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things that we can give each other, is the freedom and the ability to actually feel.
JR, you are terrific. You are just terrific.
Can you
I
say that again?
really.
I'm going to put it on a ringtone.
You want to play it back for your wife, do you?
David and Raquel said I'm pretty incredible. So, I mean, I'm going to pass it.
So thank you so much for your willingness to share around
Uh,
all those pieces.
So after doing the Epic Moments interview, you started at a 9, which was feeling pretty good. After reflecting on these lists, how are you feeling?
Oh, I definitely would say a 10. And the reason why is because we laughed, right?
Yeah.
And we laughed, and it was a beautiful experience to just go into this place. And, I think that my life, like many, we don't pause enough and we don't reflect enough. And a lot of people will say, never look back. And I disagree with that. I think it's important to look back when you're driving, to look in your rearview mirror, just to see what's behind you. And more importantly, just to see how far you've come. And, I think the questions that you guys presented gave me an opportunity to reflect and think of those individuals and think of those experiences that have given me life over the last 17 years. And so that's why I think we conclude with me ending on a 10. But I want to thank both of you for having me on, creating this platform and this space for me and other guests to really, you know, put a face to it, right? Put a face, and it doesn't have to be, when you have this conversation, it doesn't have to be this really, oh man, this energy has to go down. It could be something that we can discuss in a very, energetic way, and we can laugh about it to some degree, right? And because now we're beyond it. And I think that's what people who are going to watch and listen to this are going to take away from this, I hope, is that they're going to see my story and other people's stories and say, wait a minute, they're able to laugh, they're able to bring humor to that. So I thank both of you for having me on and giving me another opportunity to really tap into a space that I feel like I frequently don't. And it challenges me to go to that place even more, because I know that, again, in vulnerability, there is more of a community.
Are there any words of wisdom or advice or anything that you would like to share with our listeners before we finish?
Subscribe and continue to listen to every episode that you guys are going to be sharing, because I know that there is incredible value there. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is step outside of your comfort zone, listen to other people, truly be present, learn from other people. And I think that's the best thing that we can all do for one another, is put ourselves and surround ourselves in environments and communities that we don't have to be the one initiating and leading the conversation. We can actually sit back and actually enjoy it and listen. And through that, we'll learn a lot about ourselves and about our lives and about our people that we're around, and about, different things that, we have inherited, and other things that we want to break and create.
Raquel, what an amazing young man. He certainly is inspirational, isn't he? I appreciated how open he was and at times vulnerable during our conversation.
You're right about that, Dave. JR shared his very personal and intimate stories of hope and resiliency. His Epic Moments interview gave us an idea of what this motivational coach and actor uses to find energy, spark inspiration, drive passion, and build connectedness.
So much of what he said in our time talking is exactly what I had hoped would happen during our conversations on this podcast. It's going to be quite a challenge to edit this one down. Good luck with that, Raquel.
And that's why we're called the Epic Voices and Conversations Podcast, Dave.
Do I remember right that our next planned episode will be with some other past longtime attenders of the summit?
Yes, I'm excited to hear their epic moments. And we will be sharing more about the 25th Annual IVAT Summit that you can now access from the comfort of your own home. That's right, the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma has gone virtual. If you would like to find out more information about this online experience, please visit www.ivatcenters.org. This has been the Epic Voices and Conversations podcast. If you want to send us feedback or have questions, please email us at evacpodcast@gmail.com. We intend for these podcasts to provide professionals working with people who have experienced trauma or violence some hope and support to build self-awareness, increase professional self-care strategies, and to help in developing resilience while doing the work in the field.
We look forward to releasing the next episode in the series of this set of podcasts soon.
For the Epic Voices and Conversations podcast, this is Raquel Buchanan and
Dave Matthews. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you find ways to focus on your own self-care and your own epic moments. Till next time.